Hello, everyone. This is Christina Barr, and you're watching Black Tea News. Yes, I already see comments, people coming in. Thank you guys. You're jumping on the bandwagon. We're happy. We're ready to go. We're ripping and roaring. Of course, I'm Christina Barr. I'm the host of Black Tea News. Thank you all for joining me, being part of the conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about Psaki. She went on Morning Joe, I guess, because she was talking to Mika, and they were talking about the jobs report, and it was disappointing, and they had a spin for it. But she also started the way that the anchors on the show were like ready to just jump into the narrative. Like they had to mention the jobs report. I mean, they are the news, but then they're like, oh, well, we can help with the narrative too. It's like these people are so not serious people. And Psaki admitted, like, you know what, people don't really care about data. They care about how these things are gonna impact your life, which to some degree is true, but we know that Republicans or conservatives are always like data, facts over feelings, blah, blah, blah. Psaki's just like, people don't care about these data points. You gotta just make them feel a certain way. So I thought it would be worth talking about today. I also want to talk about, I did touch on this Saturday night. If you watch Let's Talk About It, a video from The View, the ladies were talking about the shooting in Oxford, and a lot of people all weekend have been trying to relate it to gun control. I've had a lot of conversations on my like TikTok, for example, and a lot of people who want to talk about gun control don't know much about guns or don't really know a way that it's going to help curb violence. Of course, if you confiscate the guns, there will be less gun violence. But we do have a right to bear arms. So in America, people aren't just going to do that. But they don't really have a way to curb gun violence without superseding our constitutional rights, especially from law-abiding citizens. And they don't really have a solution to stop violent crime. And if you are like a young woman and you're depending on your firearm to save you from a violent criminal, especially like a man who will have the capability of overpowering you, you are now at a disadvantage. So if anything, guns have saved a lot of people's lives just in general. And it's not fair to punish people who would be more vulnerable. So people have been really jumping on this and talking about this. I was talking to one of my family members yesterday, one of my sisters, about there was a school shooting not too long ago that's not really in the news. And I said, because he's black. There's a young black man, and I don't believe he actually had any fatalities, but he went to school and people were sticking up for him, like, well, he was bullied. They were making fun of him for being rich. And she's like, what? I'm like, yes, seriously, that's like what the articles were like. But there's a narrative that people like here. Even the parade that happened, that's when Darrell Brooks mowed down or hit more than 40 people, almost like 50 people at a parade. That's pretty much out of the news. And they announced at a press conference, like, we don't know the motive. We're not really going to talk about it. It's like, well, he was anti-Semitic. He had BLM stuff. I don't know if he did it just because maybe we're not sure why he did it. People got really mad when people start digging through his social media and talking about it. So there's certain things that play to a narrative, and I just don't appreciate it. Like, I do think there's ways that we can analyze situations that have happened and try to do what's best going forward to try to stop things from happening. But you also need to do a thorough investigation to actually even see why some of this happened before you're ready to just burn down everything, our rights, point fingers, and so on. At least look at information. I try not to talk too much about these things as they're going on unless there's like some information that we really know. I haven't like I've given updates on the Oxford situation. I have not talked as much as I've heard from people. Like I told you, I heard all kinds of things from people who said they were there or had somebody who was there and so on. And there were rumors that were coming out. And then the sheriff was like, there's a lot of rumors coming out, please like slow your jets. And there are things that I heard that didn't actually pan out, so I'm like, I'm super glad I didn't just say, hey, I heard this. I try to be as responsible as possible. So I just recommend when you hear any sort of situation go down, wait till information comes out and they're doing investigations. Even as you're hearing things investigations, some things won't even come out until during a trial. So before you're willing and ready to burn everything down, just slow your roll a little bit. But I do want to go back over what the ladies on The View said. I'm going to play this a TikTok that I played on Saturday because ABC is like really picky with their stuff. If you with if you I replayed something from The View a couple weeks ago, and they dinged it on social media. I'm like, this is fair use. I'm a news commentator, and they're like, we don't care. So I'm trying not to get dinged. So I'm at least gonna play this TikTok because that won't get flagged. So we're gonna talk about that. Also, there's a trans woman who has broken another record. Shocker, shocker, shocker. So I want to talk about that as well. Jesse Smollett also is decided to take the stand to defend himself. And I think it's a crime that isn't being like televised on like primetime TV because it sounds hilarious. It sounds hilarious. Last week, I think it was on Friday, we went through just memory lane because it happened 3 years ago. Can you believe that? When he had this big hate crime hoax, and I showed you guys tweets of the past of people who were like, oh my gosh, Jesse, I can't believe this happened. America's so racist, MAGA country. Even if it wasn't really MAGA, we know it was MAGA's fault because of the kind of climate they're building, and that was what they were all saying, and everything was false. Everything was false, and we played news reports. There was a really good mashup of Jesse versus saying like, oh, this happened to me, I'm still strong and whatever, and this will always have happened to me. And then the police like, I can't believe a black man would do this, would lie about something like this, which he did lie. And it's he's now on the stand. That their angle is that they're trying to spin it like he's a victim of the men that he hired, and apparently he's testifying that he was doing a little diddlying, I guess I want to say, with one of the brothers, with one of the Nigerian brothers. So people are like, is he outing someone to try to save himself? Because that's really messed up. So it is fascinating, and I gosh, don't you guys wish it was like being streamed? It just sounds hilarious. It sounds hilarious. But we do also want to talk about COVID stuff. But before we jump into like everything, that's just kind of run down everything we're going to go through today. Please visit blacktnews.com. It's black like the color and the tea like the drink. And obviously I'm in reverse, so it's over here. Right there, blacktnews.com. All my social media handles are at blacktnews on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. The only one that is different is Twitter, and that one is at True Black Tea. That is also my backup account for my TikTok account. FYI, people do usually get to have backup accounts in case something goes wrong, but I did break 64,000 today, actually, so congrats to me. Thank you guys for following, and please share different articles that I have on the website. If you would like to donate to the website, I do thank people who have dropped donations on the website. You can go to blacktnews.com/donate. If you enjoy what I do here, I want to send out like a little something for you guys, for people who have donated. So if I do send it out, you got to do it before it's like too late at the end of the year, because I want to like, I don't know, Christmas card or something. So if you do, you gotta do it soon to give me some time to get it out to you guys. But I do appreciate you guys so much. The channel continues to grow and has grown quite a bit from the beginning of the year, like on my TikTok following. I think I started in February, and I grew to 10,000 pretty fast. And what, maybe March, April or something like that, I was at that number. And now it hasn't even been a year and I'm like at 74,000. So I appreciate you guys liking, subscribing, following, doing all the things. You are well loved here and well appreciated here. God bless you all. And also check out different merchandise that I have on the site um, as well. So before we jump into it, you guys know that I like to start off with something funny. And a friend of mine, G Prime 85, I believe he did this. He put it on his page, and it looks like his art style, but it doesn't have his handle on it. But I assume it's his. So, Victim Comics. So, I thought it was appropriate. I thought it was funny because there's, uh, it does have, I just thought it was funny because it was funny. I didn't realize it was like mocking. I believe that is Jesse with the noose back there and the MAGA hats and the bleach. So that is funnier than I thought it was because I didn't realize it was about Jesse. I just thought it was funny because it was because of of just victim culture and comic books, but I did not realize it was about Jesse Smollett when I decided to pick it. So that is actually hilarious. Um, but the reason why I just thought it was funny initially is because, um, well, Jesse, the comic book industry is so left right now. And I had a conversation over the weekend with someone because I was like, I fell out of love with Marvel Comics, which is really weird, I think, for people who knew me my whole life. Before I was doing like political commentary, me and my sisters, we had a website and called thegorgeousgeeks.com. It does not like exist anymore, at least not the way I did anymore. So you can still find some of our old YouTube videos. But we would go to different conventions and we would interview different celebrities. We interviewed people on like Vampire Diaries, Being Human, the director was it the director of Rise of the Planet of the Apes, people from Superman Returns, Shane West, who was on Nikita at the time, um, a bunch of different people. So we go to different conventions as press and we'd talk to people in the industry, and we had a really cool thing going. We always would talk about having comic book rooms in our houses. Like, what if it looks like the Fortress of Solitude? I mean, just deep, so deep in the nerd culture. We didn't really cosplay much, but I did make a Wonder Woman costume once. It was for a party though, but I did wear it at Comic-Con. So yeah, we're pretty deep into it. And my dad learned how to read. He wanted to learn how to read because his dad brought him home a comic book, and he passed down the love of them to us. But he liked us reading them because back then the characters, it was always about doing right for right's sake, and the sort of customer that they were building before, the people who work in that industry now really resent, in my opinion, those kind of people. So I don't think that's just really my opinion. I mean, that's really how it is. They're really, really left wing. And I mean, there's some of the writers have said things like, if you don't like my comics, don't buy them. And then well, okay, they don't buy them and the sales are tanking. So it's just really left wing. Not only you see that bleeding through in the movies and just all media really, but it's really bad in the comic book. So I've pretty much fallen out of love with those things. Like, I know people are so excited to see Spider-Man. I don't plan to see it. I didn't see Shang-Chi. I'm not watching Hawkeye. I didn't watch Winter Soldier and Falcon show. And I did watch WandaVision and I wasn't crazy about it. But then I was just like, pretty done. And it's not just Marvel Comics, DC, it's DC Comics too. And we've talked about different things on the show, but that's why I thought this comic book was appropriate. But no, I didn't even really realize that was making fun of Jesse Smollett too. Who just painted himself as a giant victim, and it was totally unwarranted on his part. So pretty darn hilarious. G Prime 85. If you're not following him on Twitter, like I said, it's G Prime 85. He has a lot of really funny political comic books. So I do also want to thank Brighter Michigan Pack as well. I'm in their studio. I always appreciate being here. If you don't like what I have to say, they don't care. I don't care. It doesn't work like that. I'm just using the space, and I thank them for the space. But there's no one who can end me. Only I can do that, and I'm not going to, obviously. So let's jump into the different news of the day. So first things first. I wish. Well, I'll probably have to show you guys this tomorrow, but John Snyder has been on Alec Baldwin's case ever since he did that interview. People keep saying, "I can't believe he did this interview," and it just seems like he just wanted the public to feel sorry for him, I guess. But it's just obviously not going to work, I suppose. And just legally, he just made a bunch of mistakes. So I played a little bit of John Schneider mocking him a bit, just reminding people. He just said it was all garbage, and he thinks that the Baldwins are just trying to gain sympathy, and the gun wouldn't have went off. So he had a good demonstration of the kind of gun that he used, and just explain in detail how it went off. It's about 7 minutes long. It's on YouTube. So I'll clip it up and probably show you guys tomorrow. But he's on this man's case about it. And I don't know what's going to be the end of Alec Baldwin's case with this. It's going to take a while. But it's pure negligence. And the fact that he did not know that there was a bullet in there. Now, it shouldn't have been there, period. So there's an error there. But the fact that he didn't even check it himself, that is not how the sets are supposed to run. That is not within like your unions and contracts and stuff. He made a big error. And then he's also like a producer on that movie too. So there's just a lot of issues there. And Mr. Baldwin can turn on tears right on the spot, but that's not going to really help him out there. So in New York, they are going to put in more mandates for the Omicron variant. And I'm a little bit baffled. Well, I'm not baffled, I guess. That's not really fair to say. It doesn't make any sense, I guess I can say. It doesn't make any sense, but I'm not surprised that they're doing things that don't make sense, because they've been doing that for a long time. Now, it is insane if everyone's still willing to go along with it, knowing that no one has died from this new variant, and that people are reporting mild symptoms, and that in South Africa, where like they discovered it, they're like, it's not a big deal. Why is everyone freaking out? So it's pretty crazy. So in New York, they're jumping the gun, and so I want to play for you guys the media's response, because they're reporting it, but they're obviously confused as they're reporting it. And then I'll play with a little bit of de Blasio.
Mayor Bill de Blasio. The city is putting in place a vaccine mandate for private sector employers that starts on December 27th. The mayor called it a preemptive strike on Omicron and winter virus challenges. The city is also expanding the vaccine mandate for indoor dining, fitness and entertainment to include children ages 5 to 11 who are now eligible for the vaccine. And that vaccine mandate program now requires at least 2 doses of a vaccine. That would be up from 1. So I don't know what that means with J&J, which is still a one-shot vaccine.
Yep.
I don't know how that takes that into account.
And mixing and matching boosters is I guess...
That's okay, I guess.
Theoretical. Yeah.
Right.
It's interesting because... Go ahead, Andrew, what?
No, I was just going to say there is evidence that one shot, in 2 or 3 weeks after one shot, you have more antibodies than somebody who has 2 shots after 6 months.
Right.
So
I was wondering whether the adeno-vector gives you any additional... instead of just the spike proteins. And then that also begs the question of whether if you've had COVID and had antibodies to the entire virus, the actual virus itself, whether that in T cell mediated or B cell mediated is good.
Yeah. So it's pretty nuts there. It's I mean, you could see that they were clearly confused with because they're saying it doesn't really make sense because sorry, I had a error. It doesn't make sense. They're like, because you can have one shot and have more antibodies than if you just get them two shots, but it's down the line. So they're saying it doesn't ultimately make sense because people are still more protected at one point, even if they have more shots than someone who has a one dose. And they're like, well, Johnson & Johnson's only one dose, so how can you have this rule with you have to have double shots? And then how far is it going to go? Because like Israel, they keep popping on new boosters and stuff, and then the definition of vaccinated keeps changing with you have to have this booster and so on to be vaxxed up. So the rules aren't really making a lot of sense. And then they're also including children as well, because 5 to 12 you can be 5 to 11, because it was 12 and older they already could do it, but now they've included 5 to 11. I think it's 5 to 11 in the vaccinations as well. So you have to have them vaccinated as well. So they're about to do a lot of discrimination in the private sector with people who are minorities, with young kids, and they're going to continue segregation. It's funny that there's so many Black Lives Matter people. They have rallies and protests in New York. If you go online, maybe you can see people post about it on Twitter, but how much do you hear people talk about it on the news? How much do you hear people talk about it on the news? All these people doing protests about Black Lives Matter with the lockdowns. You don't hear about it a lot, but it's happening. People are really upset about it. So, and why wouldn't they be? Especially people now. So there's some people who are like, I'm never gonna get it. I'm not gonna get it, and that's their business. But there's some people who are like, I stayed indoors. I washed my hands. I wore the mask. I got my vaccine. The first dose made me sick, but I still got the second dose. Told me I was saving lives. And then I got the booster. And now I got to take another booster. And now in some places, it doesn't matter. I still have to wear the mask and so on. Dr. Fauci was saying that if you're still not sure about the Omicron, then go ahead and like wear a mask if you're not sure about the vaccination status of people around you. And if you've had 2 shots and 2 boosters and you still have to wear a mask because you're concerned about everyone else, why are you saying that? Do you really feel these people aren't protected from everyone else then? Because it's just not making a lot of sense. And they don't care. They don't care that it doesn't make sense. They just want you to not think about it. We're not supposed to ask these questions. But it was just so funny that they're reporting on it and they're confused as they're reporting on it. So here's de Blasio's announcement.
We've got Omicron as a new factor. We've got the colder weather, which is going to really create additional challenges with the Delta variant. We've got holiday gatherings. We in New York City have decided to use a preemptive strike to really do something bold to stop the further growth of COVID and the dangers it's causing to all of us. So as of today, we're going to announce a first-in-the-nation measure. Our health commissioner will announce a vaccine mandate for private sector employers across the board. All private sector employers in New York City will be covered by this vaccine mandate as of December 27th. We're going to have some other measures as well to really focus on maximizing vaccination quickly so we can get ahead of Omicron and all the other challenges we're facing right now with COVID.
So there's a lot of other countries that have gone over. They're starting to get really authoritative with it. Of course, Australia has been super crazy about it. We talked last week that there are people who escaped the voluntary camps. And I don't know if you have to escape voluntary camps. I just don't know how voluntary they are, but that we know that happened last week. Germany's doing some pretty crazy things. In Greece, I had heard that they're going to be charging the elderly if they don't get vaccinated, and they're fining them. And I guess the mindset of the fining is like, you're the most vulnerable, therefore we must fine you if you decide that you don't want to get this vaccine to protect your life, so we're going to make your life harder on you until you comply. That seems bizarre to me, but that's what they're doing overseas. That's what they're doing overseas. So, with Biden has travel restrictions. So if you come into the country, doesn't matter what your vaccination status, it doesn't matter where you're from, if you're American citizen or someone else, you have to get a COVID test within 24 hours. And again, this new variant, and people are concerned because we're going into the winter time, but this is something that's going to be endemic. It's going to be with us. There's going to be different strains, and hopefully we'll just be something that gets really, really low on the totem pole. But it just right now it sounds like Omicron, this particular variant is at that stage. No one has died from it. The symptoms are very low, and the South African doctors are just like, why are we being punished for just like noting that this exists? And by the way, I read that it's probably actually started in Europe first, and they were the ones that acknowledged it, and now they're being punished, and people wanted to stop travel. And when Trump did it, he was a terrible racist, a xenophobic person. But it's different when Biden does it, because he just cares. He cares so much for the people. He cares so much for the people. That's why they have to stop your liberty, because they care so much. That's why they have to find older people in other countries, and that's why they have to put you in voluntary camps that you can't escape from, that you have to climb over the barbed wire or whatnot, whatever it is, to get free from your voluntary COVID camp. I didn't play this. This happened, I believe, last week with Kramer going on a rant about how we just need to mandate the vaccines. This was nuts.
Lord knows what happened if you didn't partake. But back then, anyone who refused to get vaccinated would get ratted out immediately because we knew that person could hurt other people. The commonweal was a commonweal. Now we're engaged in a similar struggle with COVID, and Eisenhower would be aghast. We have immunocompromised people who are incubators for every variant to come, walking around lawfully unvaccinated? That's psychotic. We have companies that have tried hard to get people vaccinated and now backing down. We have governors who want to be president by grandstanding on a foolish states' right issue, the right to get sick, get other people sick. So it's time to admit that we have to go to war against COVID. Require vaccination universally. Have the military run it. If you don't want to get vaccinated, you better be ready to prove your conscientious objector status in court. And even then, you need to help in the war effort by staying home until we finally beat this thing.
What if there's no end, though? At what point is enough? Because now we're at the point, people were really scared of Delta. They were like, oh, this is worse. But this is new variant. We're not there. It's mild in comparison. People can get vaccinated if they want to get vaccinated. We have a very high vaccination status right now. It's very high. So what do you ever like? We want 90%, 100%, and then what happens when they come out with maybe a new one? And what's going to happen when they want everyone to take the boosters? At what point does this end? He said people are lawfully walking around unvaccinated, and he said that's psychotic. It's psychotic, he said. So many people are talking about pro-life issues and bodily autonomy. It just, especially right now with the case that was brought before the Supreme Court last week, and the leftists have been upset ever since. I'm not sure what his opinion on abortion is, but it's like, if you're going to talk about privacy and bodily autonomy, how come people aren't afforded that same kind of leeway in your mind when it comes to the vaccine? And you could say, oh, well, you get someone else sick. Well, abortion is deliberately ending a life, though. So either you believe in this concept or you don't. And it isn't, in my opinion, and I wrote about this on blacktnews.com. It's just one of the articles that I wrote on the website. it's not really bodily autonomy with abortion, because it's not about just your future and your body, you making choices for you. It involves someone else, like, directly. With the vaccine and COVID, there is a chance that you could spread it to someone else, and there is a very astronomically low chance, varies on the different variables, the person, their medical history, their age, their weight, so on. It varies, but it is still a very low possibility that that person will die if they happen to hypothetically catch that COVID from you. So if you're going to go on the body, if you want to be someone who believes in bodily autonomy, and you're going to be someone who advocates for it, then you should be anti-mandate. And there's plenty of people who think you're an idiot if you don't take the vaccine, but they still will stand up and say, we shouldn't be able to mandate it. It still should be people's choices. So when people around the world have to make voluntary prison camps, when you're finding people, now they're finding people in some places, and who knows, they're punishing people, them not being able to go to work, but all those things are being shut down, like in the courts. And also before they were shut down, though, with the OSHA requirements they're saying, well, it's not a mandate because you can still get tested. There is no requirement that they be free tests. There's no requirement that your employer has to pay for the test. So if you had to pay, first of all, it would still be a big cost for that. Look, for the company to keep paying for test after test after test for employees, which they really just wanted to do that to break your spirits, break your will, and make you submit. It's not about the rule actually making sense. None of it is about making sense. It's just about you being compliant. That's what it is. They just want to break your will until you just do what they say. Because it just doesn't make sense. So the company, that would be a lot of cost for them, but they didn't have to do it. There's no requirement in those OSHA requirements that they'd have to do it. So they could pass that on to you, and then you'd have to pay weekly to get that COVID test for you to be able to go to work and provide for your family. And there are people who buckled down and just decided to do it because of what was coming. There are people who've already been fired, terminated from their jobs. There are people who held out. And I know somebody who kept writing their company, and the company's like, well, we're trying to assess the situation. And then this came down in the courts, and they're like, okay, well, if you decide to continue this, then FYI, this is a decision that the company is making. It's not something the government is making. And then they kept saying, well, we're still assessing this. Please don't, tell us what you're not going to do. Just just let us assess it. And then they didn't give a clear answer, even when the date was like really approaching to when they said the deadline was on the 4th. But they just backed off of it. But there's so many people who are unclear about their futures going forward. And that's probably also another reason why the job numbers are down. Now, they did create an environment of people who just don't want to work, and got people used to not working to the point where this is a bunch of vagabonds, just to be honest. And now people don't have the same sort of benefits that they had with not working before, but people are still used to not working, would rather not work. And then people don't want that extra burden of, well, I don't know about COVID. I don't want to wear a mask. I don't want to get vaccinated, but I don't have to. And I definitely don't want to take a test every week. So the Biden administration is really fostering an environment of people not working. And so for them to be confused about the job numbers or to miss so much on the job numbers, it's just common sense. So Jen Psaki and Turning Point USA cut up this clip, but she was on Morning Joe, and they brought up the job numbers, and this whole exchange is pretty fascinating.
Jobs number just crossed 210 jobs just added. So 210,000. So if we look at that breaking news right now, that's a number that feels a little off?
Well, I know this sounds a little archaic, but I can't comment on them until 9:30 by rules because I work at the White House. Yeah, but I will say what people can expect the president to continue to say today, month to month, is that what we're seeing are good trends. That we are continuing to put people back to work, that we are continuing to see participation in the workforce, that we are continuing to see the unemployment rate go down. But there's more we need to do to address core problems that have existed long before the pandemic.
Because, Adrian, there's the supply chain. There's this number, which she can't comment on for an hour, so we'll keep her here.
It's a little crazy. We're not leaving. Here we are.
And a lot of other issues that you brought up earlier. How can the White House own the economy? It feels like more can be done.
And I don't think it's just the White House's responsibility. I mean, we have a lot of great things to talk about, right? Especially the record unemployment rate, especially over the last several years. The fact that we are feeling like we're constantly on the defense in the economy. What more can we be doing to affect this message overall, to talk about, how strong the economy is, even though, some people feel that it's not as strong as it really is.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've always believed, but certainly I've learned a lot from the president on, is that people do not vote on, respond to data. That's not how people experience things in their lives. Like, what does economic data mean to them? We need to make it real for people. What does this mean for childcare and what the cost of childcare is going to be? What does it mean for whether they can go back to work or not? How can they get health care for their parent? How are they going to pay for their parent to get the elder care they need? So we need to really think carefully about not getting too wonkified and making sure we're talking about things in a way that is accessible, that is how it impacts people's lives.
All right, you got to go. Yes or no? Will Build Back Better be signed by the end of the year?
Yes, I'm an optimist, Mika, but yes.
And a self-proclaimed wonky nerd.
Yeah.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, thank you very much for dropping by.
So I thought it was funny, the journalist on the show being like, well, what can we do? What can we do to help the narrative? Like, what can we do to let people know that the numbers are better than what they think it is? Just report the facts, sweetheart. Like, you're the news. The job numbers come in. You tell people what they are, and they live with that. And it's either good or it's either bad. Telling people what they're supposed to think. I don't think you're supposed to do that. On a news show. Now, if you're like an open commentator, like, I'm telling you what I think. I'm not telling you what to think. I'm telling you what I think about the matter. But they clearly have a particular spin and influence, and they're just like, what can we do to help your message in the White House, the economy? Because it's better than what, people think it is, even though these job numbers are crap. And she mentioned there was things that were systemic even prior to the pandemic. I don't know world you guys the world they're living in, but I do remember a time when we had record low unemployment, best for like Hispanics on record, Blacks on record, teens, just across the board. It was really, really good for everybody. Really, really good for everybody. Now they do have a point that sometimes people can't understand the data, or they don't realize how good they kind of have it with the numbers. Like, for example, the tax cuts. A lot of people got tax cuts, and people in my circle, whatever, realized that they got tax cuts, but like at large, so people didn't believe it, I guess, or realize that they had one. But the only thing that had something to do with the media, the same media that are kissing up to Jen Psaki, keep continuously painting a narrative, telling a story that the tax cuts are just something that Trump did to whip up with the Republicans to help off their rich friends and you and your, family of four, that you didn't get anything. Like, that was the narrative that was pushed. So the media did have a different way that they were spinning. So people did have a different perception. So even if they might have had some money back on their taxes, on their paycheck. So, there was another report the other day that the Trump tax cuts did help the middle class out the most. But what's it matter? Trump's not in office. They got what they got. They got what they wanted at the end of the day because they spun the narrative that they wanted to spin. But in the case of Jen Psaki saying people don't care about the numbers and they want to hear about childcare. I don't pay for childcare. There's so many people who don't have children who don't pay for childcare. They're so obsessed with the childcare thing. when they talk about Build Back Better, they're always like, we gotta pass this bill because the economy sucks, and we gotta pass childcare. And I'm like, people are curious about why their milk is high, Jen. People want to know why milk is like $1 more. I mean, that's what people care about. Now, I'm not saying people don't care about childcare, especially if you have kids and you want to work and have them at home. But I think it's kind of creepy how much they're focusing on the childcare, and I don't think they're doing it because they care about the kids. Like, not the administration that wants to make it readily available and cheap to kill them. No, I don't think they care about your kids. I think they well, first of all, if they do have all these people who can get childcare and they give all these subsidies or whatever for people to pay for that, there is a shortage of people willing to do that. So they have to, there's systemic problems that they'll have to address, or they should address, before they even put this in motion. And then there's a lot of people who do childcare who are related to some kind of religious organization or affiliation, and maybe they push things or teach things that the Biden administration or Congress and whoever aren't going to want to have certain values and views impacting these kids. So you have to realize, whenever you take government money, there are strings attached. And COVID should have really woken up people to that fact. For example, them trying to say, if you take Medicaid or whatever, if you work in a nursing home and you take this government money for healthcare, then we're going to fire you if you don't get the vaccine. So this is just a blatant example of how the government's money, it's not free. They confiscate it from you, and then they disperse it into these social safety nets, which it's a good thing to have some social safety nets. But I heard Charlie Kirk say, we want social safety nets, but we don't want hammocks. You know, something that people are going to like permanently, well, you wouldn't permanently nest in a hammock. I mean, I guess it depends what your life is, but that's a lot more comfortable than just sleeping in a net. And it should just be something to help you when you're down, rather than you setting up shop and planning to be there for a while. But they will actually want you to be there for a while, because the more you need them, the more power you give to them. It reminds me of a story in the Bible when, the people wanted a king, and God's like, no, we have the system of judges. That's how we're supposed to set up. And they're like, no, we want a king. And then they're just like, okay, God, if you have a king, he's going to take this, he's going to take this, he's going to take all these things from you, houses, land, and so on. And they're like, yep, that sounds great. We want a king. We want to be like everybody else. We don't want the system of judges anymore. We want a king. It's like, okay, they'll come in and you start establishing things, and I'm going to tell you what's going to happen, and people still wanted it because some people want to be ruled, I guess. But in the end, it's going to crush your neighbor, and it's going to crush the next person. It's going to crush the next person. And eventually they will get to you. There are people who are like, just comply, just comply, just comply, just comply. And now they're like, I'm double vaxxed with a booster, and I still have to mask and test. It doesn't stop. The best bet that the government has is keep building animosity between people. So you're mad at your neighbor, and Kramer's like, it's psychotic to have people walk around with no vaccine. Aren't you vaccinated? Why are you so scared? They just live off the fear. They need the fear. Another interesting that happened with Jen Psaki, someone asked her about the Biden Hunter laptop, and it was pretty hilarious. She got so defensive about this.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. The Biden administration today put out a big report about addressing corruption. I want to ask you two quick and hopefully pretty easy questions about that. Shortly after President Biden's virtual meeting with the Chinese president, the first son's attorney said that he has finally divested from a Chinese investment fund controlled by state-owned entities. I was hoping you could commit to basic transparency about that transaction, including the name of the buyer, the dollar amount, and the timing. And the second question is, my colleague Miranda Devine has a new book out called The Laptop from Hell. and I was hoping that you could confirm that the laptop is indeed authentic and not Russian disinformation, as you seemed to suggest on Twitter last year.
Well, on the first, the president's son is not an employee of the federal government, so I'd point you to his representatives. And as it relates to the book, I have neither had the time nor interest in exploring or reading the book. Go ahead, Tina. Go ahead, Tina. I think I answered your question. Go ahead. You can go to the representative of the person who's not an employee of the federal government. Go ahead, Tina. I think we have to move on. Go ahead.
Is there anything the White House?
So what's of course hilarious about this is he asked Jen, like, well, you called it misinformation. He's like, can you comment that it's real, or because you said it was misinformation like a year ago? And then she goes, well, he's not an employee of the government, so you can talk to his people. Like, what? Well, what about you, Jen? Of course, she was not press secretary at the time, but she's still accountable for what she said, right? So she could speak to that. Of course, it's awkward and she doesn't want to answer that. They didn't want to answer it back then when they knew it was obviously real. They didn't even deny it was real. I mean, they call it misinformation, but that was about as spicy as their denial got. They knew it was real the whole time. They tried to say, well, this wasn't in Biden's schedule. I'm like, why would he put it in his schedule? Like, they had such dumb ways, and the media went along with it. They had such dumb ways of denying it. So Jen Psaki, she was so triggered with that hunt. I hope someone asks her about the laptop like every day. It doesn't make sense for them to do that, but she was triggered, boy. She was so triggered. She didn't even say, I'll circle back to you on that. She just flat out was like, I answered your question. I think I answered it. I mean, she didn't, but she's accountable for her words, and it wasn't misinformation, and she knew back then it wasn't misinformation. Everyone who said it was misinformation knew it wasn't misinformation. Now, granted, it sounded like a crazy story. Like, what? Rudy Giuliani just found a laptop with Hunter's stuff on it, and someone left it. He left it at a laptop store. But it all makes sense when you remember this man's a crackhead. Crackheads do crazy things. So of course it makes sense. But that brightened my day. I want to start a TikTok trend. I don't remember if I mentioned this on Saturday night. No, I think I just thought about it maybe this morning. I want to start a TikTok trend. When you say, what do you want Peter Doocy to ask Jen Psaki? I'll go first. That's how the trends will work on TikTok. And my question is, why does Joe Biden only have 6 stockings for his grandchildren when he has a 7th? Because I'm sure she'll get testy about that one too. If you're unaware, Hunter Biden has a bastard child that the woman had to sue for paternity for, and it is his kid. And they keep saying the wrong amount of grandkids, even put all the stockings up and won't acknowledge that particular grandchild. So Peter Doocy usually asks questions that are pretty on point. A time or two, his questions are kind of more in the petty end. I admit that is more of a petty question, but I want to see how Jen tries to circle back to it. That's what I want. That'd be my question. And besides, it would be a good TikTok conversation, a starting off point anyway. But I think it's mean. You got grandkids. Like, what did the grandkid do? What did the grandkid do to deserve to not get a stocking at the White House? I mean, I'm sure she got to get that child support from all those paintings that Hunter's doing. You know, he just like gets paint and he just blows it with a straw or something crazy like that. And he's getting buttloads of money for it because it's not about his talent. It's about influence. And they all know that. It's unethical. But it is what it is. That's the world that we're living in right now. We're living in a cuckoo world. So last thing I wanted to talk about today. Oh, Jesse Smollett. I wish they were televising the case. They're not televising it. There's been a lot of crazy stories. His lawyer is a buffoon. And I mean, they accuse the judge of like trying to lunge at them because trying to get a mistrial, not going to happen, obviously. Jesse could get probation, or Jesse could end up spending a couple of years, like 4 years in prison if he's found guilty. I'm a little surprised the trial's still going on, actually, but he did take the stand, and he's testifying that his approach is that he's actually a victim of the men that he paid to, the men he paid to do the hate crime. So he got up on the stand and is claiming that he was actually involved with one of the Nigerian brothers. And I guess he's trying to maybe spin it like a lover's quarrel sort of thing. I don't know if he's sobbing on the stand or anything. I just wish it was televised, and I think we deserved it for it to be televised, because we had to suffer through the whole ordeal with the tweets, and we're like, oh my gosh, Jesse, I can't believe this happened, and the MAGA folks did this and did that. But it's hilarious how ridiculous it is. Yep, someone just commented, ridiculous. Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. I think it's funny, and I wish we could see it, but maybe there's snippets somewhere. If there's snippets, I'll show you guys. Last thing I want to talk about, there is a transgender Penn State swimmer who set a record, fastest female 500-meter time in the nation. Leah Thomas, the University of Pennsylvania swimmer who competed as a male for 3 seasons at the Ivy League school before joining the women's team this season, set new records Friday night at Akron and Zippy Invitational. Thomas, who was a second team all Ivy League swimmer as a male, now owns the fastest 500-millimeter female freestyle time in the nation after setting the Akron pool record and lowering the Penn women's all-time record with a time of 4 minutes 34 seconds. 0.6. How dominant was Thomas's performance? The Penn Sports Information Department reports Will/Leah set a pool record and meet the record in the prelims, and then went on more than 12 seconds faster in the finals to beat her teammate. Oh gosh. So why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Leah said, being trans has not affected my ability to do this sport, and being able to continue is very rewarding. I bet it is, Leah. I bet it is rewarding to continue to keep doing this and beating the women. It doesn't make any sense. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? People need to stand up and say this is crazy. This is not legitimate. This person is not a woman. Will never be a woman. Was born a man, will die a man. People can look at his bones years in the grave and see that it's a man. Competed as a man. If you want to transition, if you want to start doing surgery to yourself and whatnot, why can't you still compete as a man? Now, of course, you taking estrogen and stuff is going to affect your performance. You're not going to be as fast and so on as the rest of men. But that is the risk that you assume when you start taking the hormones and going through the surgery. That is a decision that you made. So why do you get to cross over and you have this biological advantage and then just get to dominate the field with the women? It's completely and totally unfair. And the world's freaking lost its mind to keep coddling this. If you have a child, I know you love your child. And if they decide that they are trans and they go ahead and they start transition, before they do all that stuff, you need to have a conversation with them and say, this is your decision, what you're going to do. But you're not going to be able to have your cake and eat it too. I mean, right now they can, I guess. But that's not how the laws of the world would be. Like, people keep saying we want to be fair, we want to be fair. People make their own decisions. You can't get everything you want, and it's not fair to women. So if a boy decides that he wants to be a girl, that's how he wants to identify, he's going to start taking the hormones to have that transition. They might not be able to play sports anymore. Or if they play sports, they have to play in the sport that they are biologically compelled to be. And if you're like, well, they'll get made fun of. I don't want to say I don't care, but that's a decision they made. That's a risk you choose to assume. It's not fair to the women. What's the point of women's sports? What's the point of them being segregated? If you can just have a man come in and dominate the field, it doesn't make any sense that we keep entertaining this. And I know people don't like when you speak out against this. I saw a couple people talk about it on TikTok. That is something that, man, the LGBT mob will come for you. I did a video some time ago. It's probably my most viewed video on YouTube, under my Black Teen News account anyway, of there's a YouTuber named Sam Lutz. He tried to Ben Shapiro did a video about transgenderism, and then Sam tried to debunk Ben's video. So I debunked Sam's debunk of Ben's debunk. And people did not get so mad because I wouldn't refer to Sam as a woman, and because I just won't jump on the train. And they called me, actually somebody called me some really terrible things. And they did apologize last week. But other people said things and think I'm a terrible homophobic bigot. I don't care what you think of me. I don't care what you think of me, but sex is not interchangeable. It's just not. And the fact that people will go ahead, if it's something that you can just identify as, then why do you need to take why do you have surgery, and why do you take hormones? If it's just about the way you identify. You can believe that you're a woman, but why are you taking the hormones? And you're doing it to try to match how you feel. Granted. But why do you need other people to indulge the fantasy if it's just about how you feel? You can feel like a woman and still compete with the guys. You can feel like a woman and still compete with the guys. But the fact that you're dominating, beating women by 12, 14 seconds in competitions, just destroying their records, that tells us the biological reality right there, that you have an advantage. That you have an advantage. Doesn't even look like a woman. That's a dude. That's a dude. I'm sorry. That's a dude. And you can hate me, call it hate speech. Like what Michael Scott on The Office. He's like, it's not hate speech. He's like, well, I hated it. I don't care if you hate it. It's just the truth. It's just the truth. And I don't know if we're going to be getting worse, or if there's a way that this can get better with our society, because the people keep pushing it to the max. And this is the frontier that they want to fight on. And there's always going to be a new frontier to fight on, because when you have constant victims, that's what a lot of people will raise money on and so on. But we got to get some common sense. Last thing I'll mention, I did a video like maybe 2 weeks ago about Blue's Clues and how they had trans. They had all these LGBT flags on Blue's Clues, which, by the way, it's like preschool age show. Preschool is like 3 to 5, FYI. And so they had P for Pride and like an alphabet book, and they had all these different flags. I only mentioned the pansexual flag to be as least controversial as possible, but I had a problem with a lot of the other stuff, particularly the transgender stuff, because you should not be instilling the gender confusion in your kids. Male, there's male and female. If people who do have questions about it normally grow out of it, and there is a trend going on right now that is influencing young women. Abigail Schreier's book, Irreversible Damage, touched a lot about it. People really hate that book. People really mad that she wrote it. Still true. Still true. We've talked about it a little bit on the show, but people are really mad that girls, young women who have all these other kind of issues with depression and so on, who would in maybe other circumstance would be cutters and bulimic and all the other kind of stuff, instead have latched on to transgenderism. And some of them will go that way. They'll even cluster together and do it together. Be groups of people who will go through it. Just like, because women we feel each other's pains. We're very empathetic to one another. So you have like a group of girls will be like, oh gosh, I'm really a boy. And they will go through the whole trans process. And when they go to like a doctor or something, a lot of the doctors today, they don't try to really work through the problem. You have assumption that you're a certain way, and they will diagnose you with your assumption when it comes to the transgenderism. And there have been people, 60 Minutes did a segment about a young woman who decided, who came to the conclusion she was trans, did transition, had her breasts removed, had hormones and everything, then realized she was wrong, detransitioned, and all in the span of a year. All in the span of a year. There's activists are like, you can just always get new breasts. Don't feel bad about chopping them off. That's crazy. That's why are we allowing people to just mutilate themselves over this? Anyway, I can rant about all that more kind of a different day. But anyway, I had a problem with that but I only picked on the pansexual flag because I thought that was the least controversial, because pansexual is about having no sexual limitations, and I really think that's inappropriate for a kid's show. And then there's also a drag queen who led a pride parade. So someone was going back and forth with me, and they said they had no problem with a 3-year-old being taught by a drag queen on Blue's Clues. And I'm like, okay, well, you have parental discretion. You can teach your kids how you want to teach. But the problem here is that there's so many people who, other parents would have a problem with it. The problem is that you guys want to supersede and try to outreach and evangelize to all these other kids who aren't your kids and supersede parental authority because you don't like the way that they think. That's really what it's about. And I also did write about this on blacktnews.com. So you can go to blacktnews.com and read this article. But this interaction I had with this person was over the weekend. And so he did a video. So I replied to his video. And he was upset about my video. And then he started going through other my videos. So he believes the reason why you need all this stuff on Blue's Clues is to teach tolerance and acceptance to your kids. That's what everyone keeps saying. You need to expose them to all these sexualities and drag queens and so on, because it's so important that your kids are tolerant. So he went on another one of my videos, and then he's like, oh, I understand you now. You're a token Republican. And when people start throwing around the word token like that, especially in the context of what they usually will say it to me, they don't believe I am a sincere person in my views. And like the other day, someone even said I was pandering. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not surprised that the tolerant leftists, which is Profile actually said intolerant left, I'm not surprised that you guys are not serious about the acceptance thing, and that you turn around and say something that's pretty racial to me. So I ended up blocking this guy. And then he had another account. It came back. And then he had another account. I blocked that one. And then there were other accounts that didn't have quite the same name as his, that were private. But then they came back and started commenting on him. So I'm like, don't stalk me. Don't stalk me. But people get so offended because they take it personal. And I'm like, but do you even care about the kids? And in the case of this swimmer and people who are like, trans people need to be able to do whatever, but do you care about the women? Like when you say you need a trans woman to go into a woman's prison, do you care about the women? Do you care about the fact that women are getting pregnant in prison? Because you got so many trans people coming into prisons now. Why don't we care about the women? Why don't we care about the women? They're just a tool. And you know what? Women have constantly been a tool, a talking point for actually a lot of really sick policies, including abortion. People keep saying we need to have it because women will have back alley abortions, when the truth is that the founder of NARAL, big like pro-abortion site, women's rights, blah, 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 found Bernard Nathanson, he admitted that they had all these stats and stuff about how many people supported abortion, which were a lie. They inflated the numbers, so it made it seem like the public was for it. And they also inflated the numbers of women who were doing self-harm. So people are like, oh, we got to have safe abortions, which I don't know how you have safe abortion when the goal is to kill a baby. So they blatantly lied. And a lot of these people in the past, when they were really pushing these laws and they were trying to strip away abortion restrictions, you had people who were into eugenics and you had people who were into population control. And to this day, people push this stuff trying to totally remove the stigma. We talked about this, I think maybe last week, maybe I just talked about it on Saturday. But they move women and manipulate them to feel this is empowering, so they can come along and sell your children's remains. It's a really sick and twisted world in which we live in. Really sick and twisted, but it's not because you care. It's not because they care about the women. It is not because they care about the women. And when people, oh my gosh, I had a conversation like an hour ago with somebody about racism. I said they don't bring up people who talk about racism don't actually normally care about racism. Especially people of a different race, like a black person says they care about racism. And then they'll say, and then you can point out like, you're racist. And they're like, no, I can't be racist because I haven't been in an oppressor because of the system, how it's set up and blah, blah, blah. So they twist the definition of racism so it can never apply to them. And then they're like, well, that's prejudice. It's not racism. Like, you're treating people like trash because they're different. You're not a good person. What does it matter if you call it prejudice or racist? We all know what it means. You're just trying to make it seem like you're better than what you are. You're a bad person if you treat other people badly just because they're different. And you cannot, and for anyone who wants to jump on to the whole, I just talked about trans athletes and stuff like that, you can still treat people respectfully and not agree with what they do. But my concern is there's no consideration to the women. That's my concern. So someone has to lose out. Someone has to lose out. So if you make a choice, sometimes you have to deal with the choices that you make. I know I said I would mention the ladies on The View, but I've gone kind of late now. I'll bring it up tomorrow. We'll go more in depth than that. I'm getting heated. Please visit blacktnews.com. Check out different articles that I've written on the site. Again, I talked about the Blues Clues thing. I did an article about that and critical race theory and a bunch of other things. I did do an article on the trans athlete who was in the Olympics, which she ended up like just totally fizzing out. But it's happening. The Olympic level is happening in college sports, and it's happening in high school sports. So parents, y'all better do something if y'all want your girls to keep getting scholarships and setting records and so on, or there will be a man who will be there doing it in a wig and a dress. So if you don't get passionate about trying to help your kid get to where they need to be, there's going to be a man that's going to knock your daughter down and steal her crown. That's the world we live in. But you can go check out those articles on blacktnews.com. Please make sure that you guys check out different merchandise that I have as well. I have books that I've written, some for all young adult, middle grade, new adult stuff. This is a chapter book that your kids, I'm sure, will love. Also got different merchandise, different mugs, like the pumpkin spice season. So you can drink your cocoa or I guess pumpkin spice beverages out of the mug. You can get that. The My Money, My Business shirt, which I made because so many people are trying to say that you have no opinion on abortion. It's like you guys are trying to use our taxpayer dollars to pay for it with the stripping away of the Hyde Amendment. And also they do use your money to buy fetal remains. The government, FDA, bought fresh, never frozen fetal parts for humanized mice experiments. And I wish that were a joke. It's definitely not a joke, and it's sick and it's gross. But you have a voice. Don't let anyone tell you. I don't care if you don't have a uterus. Don't let people tell you that you're not allowed to talk about it. Also got other stuff. The Constitution is Glorious Liberty document. Got some stuff with Black Tea. So please go to the website, check out different stuff that I have. Thank you guys for joining me today. If you want to support, go to blacktnews.com/donate. I thank everyone who has. And I want to put out something a little special for you guys on Christmas, those who have the donation. So if you're like got to do it as, if you want to do something, I don't know, get like a postcard or something. I can only send it, within a certain amount of time for the holidays. So better sooner than later if you're waiting to donate. But God bless you guys. I'll see you tomorrow.